my postnatal care experiences have been fairly varied depending on what issues I've been suffering from, because I've had complications in all 3 pregnancies and they have fed into my aftercare, I suppose. The care that I received in my antenatal care versus my postnatal care, I suppose there's an element where you've had the baby now and you are just left to it. You just have to get on with it, don't you? My antenatal care was borderline obsessive with all 3 children because I had complications in pregnancy. So with Ben, I showed protein in my urine from a really early stage, like 11 weeks maybe. Now, protein in your urine is normally an indication of preeclampsia, but that's a much later issue. So I was constantly checked, constantly doing like these massive 24-hour urine samples where I had to collect everything that I weed for a whole day. I was having my blood pressure checked all the time. From very early on, I was seen fortnightly. So I would be seen once a month in my community and once a month at the hospital, which was great because I felt like I was being really well looked after and that they were really monitoring me. But because it was often different people, so I would see this midwife here and I would see this consultant, and other times I would turn up and the consultant would go, no, I don't know why you're here, I don't know why this appointment's been made, and I'd have to go through the whole rigmarole of explaining the story again. I much preferred the appointments with my community midwife because it was the same person all the time, and she knew, she understood, she knew what was going on. So my antenatal care was detailed and regular, but not always as effective as it could be. As it turned out, I think I had preeclampsia right at the very last minute, and nobody ever really told me that. My blood pressure went through the roof, and in terms of my postnatal care, my blood pressure never settled again. So I came home from hospital with Ben when he was a couple of days old after my C-section, and then the day the midwife came around, I think the next day and the following day after that, when the midwife came, I was sent back to hospital because my blood pressure was through the roof again, and I stayed in hospital for I think a further 5 days while they monitored and sorted my blood pressure out and got it down. And I was then on that same medication for 6 months or more. So I was, there was a lot of involvement, I suppose, in my postnatal care. In terms of the girls with Chloe, I think it was all fairly straightforward. I had gestational diabetes in my pregnancy with Chloe. So again, I was showing protein in my urine, but by that point we'd kind of accepted that was just what I did in pregnancy and nobody seemed to be particularly bothered. I had fairly regular blood tests like for renal function and stuff, but there was not the same obsessive checking. This time it was more fairly regular blood pressure checks and the gestational diabetes, but that didn't cause any massive issues for me. It just meant, again, that I was being checked every fortnight, monthly with the community midwife, monthly at the antenatal clinic where they were checking my sugars. I was admitted once or twice for blood pressure issues, for ketones. But again, it was all fine. And I don't really remember a lot about my postnatal care with Chloe. I guess it must have just been fine. And then with Amy, you know, the protein in my urine showed from the very start this time, so they were more concerned about it, but still didn't really do anything. I was put on blood pressure medication really early with her because my blood pressure went up quite quickly. So I had like a week of rest at home and medication, and then again constant monitoring of my blood pressure, of the protein, checks for gestational, which didn't occur this time, and then my postnatal care with Amy was quite lengthy because I had problems with my blood pressure again, with heavy bleeding, but I was really well looked after by my community midwives who used to just come around all the time, and they did everything they could to keep me out of hospital because they knew me well enough, and I think because they kind of knew my circumstances and things, they kind of pushed it a bit to be able to keep me at home, because there were certain factors where my blood pressure was reaching a point where really I should be readmitted, but because they knew they knew the history, they were able to keep me at home, which I really appreciated. In terms of my overall care experience after having my babies, I didn't get a lot of support, but I didn't need it. I think it was there if I wanted it. That, you know, the health visitor was there, but we used to have a clinic on a Tuesday afternoon where we could go and get babies weighed and meet other mums, and the health visitor kind of ran that clinic, so it was almost like a more informal drop-in, which was lovely because you could kind of just raise little questions without having to make a big fuss about it, make a phone call, make an appointment. It was just like a little drop-in. And also met friends that way as well, which was really nice. That clinic I don't think actually exists anymore, which is a real shame. I only did that with Ben because when the girls were younger you couldn't take an older sibling, but it didn't matter by then. I was fairly confident in what I was doing. I was really lucky that Dave was able to take quite extended periods off work each time. I think he had the best part of a month off with each child, and you know, your 6 week postnatal check. What a joke. I don't even think I went with Amy because it was just so pointless. One of the things I remember people being obsessed with in my postnatal care was contraception. Have you thought about contraception? And every time I was like, I've just had a C-section and I've got a newborn baby. I'm not having sex. That's the best contraception ever. But yeah, they always hammered that home because, you know, there is that risk, isn't there, that you could get pregnant again quite quickly. So looking at comments from Mumsnetters, we've got many felt strongly that there should be more focus on and resources for mental health, as well as greater compassion and empathy from staff. Personally, that wasn't an issue for me. There was the empathy and compassion from the postnatal, for both antenatal and postnatal care, particularly in my community, was amazing. My community midwife was really lovely, and I was genuinely gutted after I'd had Amy and been signed off that I didn't really need to see her ever again because we'd kind of become friends. Others felt more attention needed to be given to long-term issues, for example, pelvic floor. My pelvic floor is fine. I've had 3 C-sections. It hasn't really suffered any pressure. What I really would have benefited from, though, is some postnatal exercise and some help on dealing with the C-section. After I had Ben, I just assumed that it would just heal and be fine. 3 sections in 4 years doesn't do your core strength any good at all. And I now have my core is basically made of sand and feathers. I've got no core strength and no idea how to fix that. And my back overcompensates, so I now suffer a lot with back pain as a result of not really knowing how to use my body anymore. I have a fairly standard C-section overhang, and that's whatever, it's there, but it's the healing and the muscle kind of stuff inside that some postnatal exercise classes or some physio or something, I think, I've been hacked open and then just left to it. There just doesn't, that's where there seems to be a lack of aftercare. I think if I'd had major surgery for something else, I think, there would have been more thought around that. So yeah, for me, the longer term health implications of 3 C-sections was definitely not dealt with. Many Mumsnetters said that they wanted better support for breastfeeding and infant feeding. And again, I can't say that was a problem for me. What I can say is that with Chloe, she did not take to breastfeeding straight away. And I think, had I not been an experienced feeder, because I'd fed successfully with Ben for 8 months, I think they would have let me give up because she was a bit of a pain, but I was really determined. And because I was determined, they gave me all the time I needed and the support I needed to make sure that she was feeding before we left hospital. But if I hadn't been that determined, I don't think they would have pushed me. And beyond that, any support that I needed with feeding was fine. If I called someone for some help, they gave it to me. I don't think I really needed much help at home. I do remember the midwife giving me some advice on holds with Ben, which really helped. And finally, other Mumsnetters said that they felt more staff in the community would be a positive change. As I've said, I had pretty much had the same midwife for all 3 pregnancies in the community. There were other women that I met during that time, but yeah, having the same person was amazing. And I do think that if having more staff in the community means more continuity of care, so that other people can have that same experience that I did, then yeah, absolutely. This video was filmed as part of the Mumsnet campaign, Better Postnatal Care, Aftercare, Not an Afterthought, and I would love it if you could share this in support of that campaign.